The call came at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was elbow deep in drywall compound, renovating another flip house in the worst part of town, when my phone buzzed against the paint-splattered workbench. "Poppy, you need to sit down." Zoe's voice cracked through the speaker. "My name is Poppy, and I've spent the last 7 years perfecting the art of being invisible. While my step-family lived off my dead father's money, I learned to swing a hammer, read contracts, and sleep 3 hours a night. Tonight, that was about to pay off. I'm standing in sawdust wearing coveralls at midnight. Sitting isn't really an option." I wiped my hands on a rag, already knowing this wasn't good news. Zoe only called this late when someone was dying or getting divorced. I found something. About the house. The house. My childhood home. The place where I'd hidden in closets during Sylvia's dinner parties, where I'd carved my initials under the porch steps, where my father had taught me to change a tire in the driveway. The house that should have been mine. What kind of something? The kind that means Brad and Monica are about to lose everything. I set down my putty knife and walked to the window. Outside, the neighbourhood looked like a war zone. Broken streetlights, chain-link fences, houses with more boards than windows. This was my world now. Had been since I was 21 and learned that grief comes with paperwork. Tell me. They refinanced it. Twice. Used Dad's name on documents, forged his signature on the second mortgage. The bank's about to foreclose. My father had been dead for 7 years. His signature had been worthless for just as long. How do you know this? Remember Jake from high school? He works at First National now. Saw the paperwork cross his desk today. Poppy, they owe $800,000. The house is worth maybe $650 in this market. I closed my eyes and saw Thanksgiving dinner 3 weeks ago. The one I'd politely declined. Brad carving turkey like he owned the world. Monica posting Instagram stories from my father's dining room. Sylvia holding court in the living room where my mother's piano used to sit. You should be grateful, Sylvia had told me the last time I'd visited. Not everyone gets a guest room whenever they need it. A guest room. In the house where I'd lived for 12 years. Poppy, you still there? Yeah, I'm here. I was always here. Working, planning, waiting. There's more. The foreclosure notice goes public next week. They don't know yet. I walked back to my workstation and stared at the half-finished wall. 7 years of 16-hour days. 7 years of buying houses other people had given up on, fixing them with my own hands, selling them for enough profit to buy the next one. 7 years of living in construction zones and eating ramen while my step-family threw dinner parties with my inheritance. What's the timeline? Auction scheduled for January 15th. But if someone makes a cash offer before then, the bank would take it? In a heartbeat. Jake says they just want it off their books. I opened my laptop and pulled up my bank account. The number stared back at me like a dare. $850,000. Every penny I'd earned, saved, and scraped together since the day I learned that love doesn't guarantee inheritance. Poppy, what are you thinking? What was I thinking? I was thinking about the Christmas party Brad and Monica were planning. The one where they'd serve champagne in crystal glasses my father had bought for my mother's birthday. I was thinking about Sylvia's charity friends, who'd whisper about that poor girl who never made anything of herself while standing in rooms I'd once called home. I was thinking about the night my father died, when I'd driven 4 hours from college to find Sylvia already changing the locks. I'm thinking, I said, closing the laptop, that it's time to come home. What does that mean? It means I'm about to make the best investment of my life. The silence on the other end stretched long enough for me to hear my neighbour's dog barking through the thin walls. Poppy, please tell me you're not about to do something crazy. I looked around the gutted house, at the tools I'd bought with my own money, at the life I'd built from nothing while they spent my father's legacy on vacations and luxury cars. Crazy would be letting them keep it. How much do you have saved? Enough. That's not an answer. It's the only answer that matters. The law office smelled like leather and disappointment. Lloyd Bond sat across from me, spreading documents across his mahogany desk like he was dealing cards. Your stepbrother's in deep trouble, he said, adjusting his glasses. Deeper than he knows. I'd found Lloyd through Zoe's network, a real estate attorney who specialised in foreclosure cases, and didn't ask too many questions about motivation. The kind of lawyer who understood that sometimes justice needed a little help. "Show me everything." He slid the first document toward me. "Original mortgage from 2019. Your father's signature. Legitimate. Brad inherited the house, took out a standard mortgage. And then he got greedy." Lloyd flipped to the next page. "Second mortgage in 2021. Used your father's name again. Forged the signature. Bank didn't catch it because the original loan was in good standing." I studied the signature. It looked like my father's handwriting, but something was off. The R in Robert was too sharp, the loop in the O too perfect. "How much?" 300,000. They used it to buy Monica's BMW and renovate the kitchen. My kitchen, the one where my father had taught me to make pancakes on Sunday mornings. "Third mortgage came 6 months ago," Lloyd continued. "Same scam, different bank. Another 250. For what?" "Brad's business is failing. He's been using the house as collateral to keep his company afloat." I leaned back in the chair. My father had built that business from nothing, turned it into something worth inheriting. Brad had managed to destroy it in 7 years. "The foreclosure notice? Goes public Monday. But here's the thing." Lloyd pulled out another document. "I've been watching this property. The bank's motivated. They'll take any reasonable cash offer to avoid the auction." "Define reasonable." 800,000, maybe less if you move fast." I opened my purse and pulled out a cashier's check. Lloyd's eyes widened when he saw the amount. "You're serious about this?" "Dead serious." He picked up the check, examined it like it might disappear. "Where did you get this kind of money?" "I worked for it." That wasn't the whole truth, but it wasn't a lie either. Every dollar had come from houses I'd bought broken and sold whole, from 18-hour days and skipped meals and sleeping on air mattresses in empty rooms. "Your step-family has no idea? They think I'm still waiting tables." I had waited tables for 2 years after Dad died, while I learned construction during the day and served drunk college kids at night, while Brad threw parties in my childhood bedroom and Sylvia redecorated my mother's garden. This is going to destroy them financially. "Good." Lloyd studied my face. "You understand what you're doing here? This isn't just buying a house. This is revenge. It's justice. Same thing, different packaging." He was right, but I didn't care. Justice, revenge, karma. Call it whatever made you sleep better at night. I called it coming home. "How long until the sale goes through?" "If I file today? 2 weeks, maybe less." "Do it." Lloyd gathered the papers, then paused. "What happens after? You own the house, but they're living in it. Eviction takes time." "Let me worry about that." "Poppy, I have to ask. Is this legal? Every penny of that check came from legitimate sources. The house is in foreclosure. I'm making a legal offer. What's illegal about it?" "Nothing. But your step-family won't see it that way." "My step-family sees a lot of things differently than I do." Lloyd nodded and started making copies. "I'll need proof of funds, income verification, the usual paperwork." I pulled a folder from my bag. Tax returns, bank statements, business licenses for my construction company. 7 years of documentation that proved I wasn't the failure they thought I was. "Jesus," Lloyd muttered, flipping through the pages. "You've been busy." I had motivation. "What kind of business is this? Property management?" "I buy houses nobody wants and make them worth wanting." "Like this one?" "Exactly like this one." Lloyd's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and frowned. "It's the bank. About your property." "Answer it." He picked up the phone. "Lloyd Bond. Yes. I have a client interested. Cash offer. Full asking price. Today, if possible." I watched his face change as he listened. "I see. And they don't know yet?" "No. My client prefers to remain anonymous until closing." "Absolutely." He hung up and looked at me with something like admiration. They accepted. Closing set for December 20th. 4 days before Christmas. Perfect timing for a family reunion. I stood up and shook his hand. "Send me the paperwork." "Poppy, one more thing. What if they fight this? Contest the sale? With what money? You said it yourself, they're broke." "They could claim fraud, emotional distress, family interference." "Let them try." I walked toward the door, then turned back. Lloyd, when you file those papers, make sure Brad gets a copy. I want him to know exactly who bought his house. That's not standard procedure. Make it standard? The text came while I was installing new fixtures in a bathroom that hadn't seen an update since the Carter administration. Christmas at the house this year. Can't wait to show everyone the new chandelier. You're welcome to stop by if you're not too busy with whatever it is you do. Sylvia. I screenshot the message and sent it to Zoe with 3 laughing emojis. Her response was immediate. The audacity. Should I tell her? Not yet. Let them plan their party. I pocketed the phone and went back to work. The irony was perfect. They were planning to host Christmas in a house they'd lose in 6 days. My phone rang an hour later. Brad's name flashed on the screen. Well, the prodigal stepdaughter returns my calls. What do you want, Brad? Mum told me she invited you for Christmas. I wanted to make sure you understood the dress code. Enlighten me. Clean clothes, maybe something that doesn't smell like paint thinner. I set down my wrench and walked to the window. Outside, kids were building a snowman in the yard next door. Normal families doing normal things. I'll keep that in mind. Look, Poppy, I know we haven't always seen eye to eye, but it's Christmas. Family time. Mum's really excited about the new dining room. The new dining room. Had it completely redone. Italian marble, custom cabinets. Cost a fortune, but Monica deserves nice things. My mother's dining room, where she'd taught me to set a proper table, where my father had carved the turkey every Thanksgiving until the cancer made his hands shake too much to hold the knife. Sounds expensive. Worth every penny. You should see the before and after photos Monica posted. Got 3,000 likes. I'm sure Dad would have loved seeing his house on Instagram. The line went quiet for a moment. It's not his house anymore, Poppy. It's mine. Has been for 7 years. Right, of course. Anyway, Christmas dinner's at 4. Try not to track mud through the foyer. He hung up before I could respond. I called Zoe immediately. Please tell me you recorded that conversation. Better. I have an idea. I'm listening. What if we suggested a family photo session? You know, for the holidays? Get everyone together in the house for some meaningful family memories. Zoe, you're brilliant. I know. I'll call Monica. Tell her it was my idea. She loves being photographed in expensive rooms. Make it December 21st, the day after closing. The day after you own the house? Exactly. 2 hours later, Zoe called back. It's set. Monica's hiring a professional photographer. She wants to use the new dining room and the renovated kitchen. Perfect. She also asked if you'd be in the photos. I told her probably not, since you're always working. What did she say? That it was probably for the best. Her exact words were, Poppy doesn't really photograph well anyway. I laughed, but it came out sharper than I intended. She has no idea what's coming. Poppy, are you sure about this? Once you walk into that house with the deed, there's no going back. I've been planning this for 7 years. I'm not backing down now. What if they call the police? For what? Buying a house legally? For breaking their hearts? I paused, considering this. They broke mine first. That's not the same thing. Isn't it? Zoe sighed. Just promise me you'll be careful. Desperate people do stupid things. They're not desperate yet. They don't even know they're broke. They will be soon. That evening, I drove past the house. Christmas lights outlined the roof line, and I could see Monica through the kitchen window, gesturing animatedly at something, probably planning the menu for their final Christmas dinner. The house looked exactly the same as it had when I was 12. Same red brick, same white shutters, same oak tree in the front yard where I'd hung a tyre swing until Sylvia had it removed because it lowered the property value. I parked across the street and watched Brad pull into the driveway in his BMW, the same BMW they'd bought with money stolen from my father's name. My phone buzzed with another text from Sylvia. Forgot to mention, we're doing a white elephant gift exchange this year. Bring something nice, nothing from a thrift store. We have standards to maintain. I typed back, don't worry, I'm bringing something you'll never forget. That's the spirit. See you Christmas Eve. I put the phone away and started the engine. 6 more days. 6 more days until I walked into my childhood home, carrying the deed in my purse, and watched their world collapse. 6 more days until they learned that the quiet stepdaughter they dismissed and ignored had been planning their downfall since the day they locked me out. The house looked warm and inviting with all those Christmas lights, but I knew better. I'd learned a long time ago that the prettiest packages often held the biggest disappointments. This time, I was the one bringing the surprise. The courthouse smelled like old coffee and broken dreams. I sat in the waiting area, watching Lloyd shuffle through papers one last time. "Everything's in order," he said, not looking up. "Once you sign these documents, the house is yours." And they still don't know? The bank's required to notify them within 24 hours of closing, but that's tomorrow's problem. A clerk called my name. We walked into a sterile room where a notary waited with more papers than seemed necessary to buy a house. "State your full name for the record." Poppy Marie O'Connor. The same last name I'd had before my father remarried. The same name I'd kept while Brad took on the family business and Sylvia redecorated my childhood bedroom. "And you're purchasing 847 Maple Street for the amount of $850,000 cash." The notary's eyebrows went up slightly. She'd probably never seen someone my age buy a house outright. I signed document after document. Transfer of ownership, title insurance, property tax acknowledgements. Each signature felt like crossing a bridge I'd been building for 7 years. "Congratulations," Lloyd said when the last paper was notarized. "You're now the official owner." He handed me a folder containing copies of everything, plus the original deed. My name was printed in bold letters across the top. "What happens now?" "Now you decide when to tell them." I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Zoe's contact. "It's done." "Holy shit! You actually did it." "Language, cousin." "Sorry, holy crap, you actually did it." Lloyd was watching me with curiosity. "What's your next move?" "Family photo session tomorrow at 2. Everyone will be there." "You're going to ambush them?" "I'm going to come home." I left the courthouse and drove straight to the house. My house. The words felt strange, like wearing shoes that were the right size but had been broken in by someone else. I parked in the driveway and walked to the front door. Used my old key, the one I'd never returned because no one had ever asked for it back. The house was empty. Brad and Monica were probably at work, Sylvia at her book club. I had maybe 2 hours before anyone came home. I walked through rooms that had been mine once. The living room where I'd watched Saturday morning cartoons. The kitchen where my mother had taught me to make chocolate chip cookies. The staircase where I'd sat listening to my parents argue about money before the divorce. Everything was different. New paint, new furniture, new memories layered over old ones like wallpaper. I climbed the stairs to my old bedroom. Monica had turned it into an office, complete with a white desk and motivational posters about living your best life. My old closet was full of her clothes. I opened the desk drawers, not sure what I was looking for. Bills, mostly. Credit card statements, loan documents, receipts for things they couldn't afford. In the bottom drawer, I found something that made my hands shake. An envelope addressed to me, in my father's handwriting. Postmarked 3 days before he died. I sat on Monica's expensive chair and opened it with trembling fingers. "Poppy, if you're reading this, something happened to me before I could fix things. There's another will, the real one. Ray has it, but Sylvia doesn't know. You were supposed to get the house. You were supposed to get everything. I'm sorry I waited too long to make it right. The combination to the safe is your mother's birthday. Love, Dad." I read it 3 times before the words sank in. My phone rang. Zoe's name on the screen. "Where are you?" "In the house." "Zoe, I found something." "What kind of something?" "A letter from Dad. There's another will." "What do you mean, another will?" "He left me everything. The house, the business, all of it. But there's a safe, and I need to find Ray." "Ray the lawyer? Dad's old lawyer?" "He's been sitting on this for 7 years. That son of a bitch. I need to find that safe." I hung up and searched the house systematically. Master bedroom, guest rooms, basement, attic. Nothing. Then I remembered. Dad's study, the room Sylvia had converted into a wine cellar. I went downstairs and found the hidden panel behind the wine rack, the same panel where Dad used to hide Christmas presents when I was little. The safe was still there, smaller than I'd expected. I entered my mother's birthday, 04, 15 and 1970. It clicked open. Inside were documents, jewellery, and another envelope with my name on it. This one contained a will dated 6 months before my father's death, the one that left everything to me. My phone buzzed with a text from Brad. Mum said you might stop by today. Don't touch anything. Monica just had the house professionally cleaned. I took pictures of every document in the safe, then put everything back except the will. That one went into my purse, right next to the deed. Tomorrow's family photo session was going to be more interesting than anyone expected. I locked the safe, replaced the wine rack, and walked to the front door. "See you tomorrow," I said to the empty house. My house. The photographer was already setting up when I arrived at 2:15. Monica directed him around the living room like she was staging a magazine shoot. The lighting needs to be perfect for the mantle shot. This marble cost more than most people's cars. Sylvia sat in Dad's old chair, wearing pearls and a smile that could cut glass. "Poppy dear, you made it. I wasn't sure you'd show." "Wouldn't miss it?" Brad emerged from the kitchen carrying 2 wine glasses. "Look what the cat dragged in. You clean up nice, sis." I was wearing jeans and a sweater, the same clothes I'd worn to sign the deed yesterday. "Where's Monica?" "Upstairs changing outfits. Again. She wants to make sure her dress matches the new curtains." The photographer, a thin man with expensive equipment, looked around the room. "This is a beautiful home. How long have you lived here?" 7 years, Brad said. "Inherited it from my father." "Our father," I corrected. Brad's smile tightened. "Right, our father." Monica appeared at the top of the stairs, in a red dress that probably cost more than I made in a month waiting tables. Back when I waited tables. "Sorry, everyone. I couldn't decide between the Versace and the Chanel." She descended the stairs like she was walking a runway. The photographer started snapping pictures immediately. "Beautiful, natural, give me more of that confidence." Zoe arrived as Monica was posing by the Christmas tree. She hugged me and whispered, "You ready for this?" "More than ready." "Where's Lloyd?" "Parking. He'll be here in 5 minutes." The photographer gathered everyone in the living room. "Let's start with a family portrait by the fireplace. Everyone squeeze together." I stood at the edge of the group, watching Brad put his arm around Sylvia, Monica adjusting her dress, everyone smiling like they belonged in a Christmas card. "Poppy, move closer," the photographer called. "You're barely in the frame." "I'm fine where I am." "Come on," Brad said. "Don't be antisocial." The doorbell rang. "I'll get it," I said, walking toward the front door. Lloyd stood on the porch, briefcase in hand, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "You sure about this?" he asked quietly. "Positive." I led him into the living room. The photographer was still adjusting his lights. "Everyone, this is Lloyd. He's here about some paperwork." Brad looked confused. "What kind of paperwork?" "The kind that changes everything." Lloyd opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. "I'm here regarding the ownership of this property." Monica laughed. "Ownership? We own this house. Have for 7 years. "Actually," Lloyd said, "as of yesterday, you don't." The room went silent except for the photographer's camera clicking. Sylvia stood up slowly. "What are you talking about?" Lloyd pulled out the deed and held it up. "This property was purchased yesterday by Poppy O'Connor for $850,000. Cash." Brad's wine glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the hardwood floor. "That's impossible," Monica said. "She doesn't have that kind of money." "She does now," Lloyd replied. I reached into my purse and pulled out the deed. "It's all here, legal and binding." Brad's face went from confused to angry in seconds. "This is some kind of joke." "No joke. The house was in foreclosure. You refinanced it twice using Dad's forged signature. The bank was happy to accept my offer." "Forged signature?" Sylvia's voice cracked. "What are you talking about?" Lloyd pulled out more documents. "Your son used your late husband's name on loan applications dated 2 years after his death. That's fraud." Monica grabbed Brad's arm. You told me those loans were legitimate. They were. I had power of attorney. Power of attorney doesn't extend beyond death, Lloyd said calmly. The photographer was still taking pictures, apparently thinking this was all part of some elaborate family drama he was supposed to document. Stop taking pictures, Monica screamed. Sylvia sank back into the chair, her face pale. How much do we owe? 800,000, I said, plus interest, plus penalties. We don't have that kind of money, Brad whispered. I know, that's why I bought the house. I walked to the mantel and picked up a framed photo of Brad and Monica at their wedding. They looked so happy, so confident that their golden life would never end. You have 30 days to vacate the premises, Lloyd announced, pulling out another set of papers. These are your eviction notices. He placed them on the coffee table like he was dealing cards. Monica started crying. Actual tears, not the pretty kind she posted on social media. This can't be legal, Brad said. She's family. You can't evict family. Watch me. I reached into my purse again and pulled out the second envelope, the one I'd found in Dad's safe. Oh, and Brad? There's one more thing you should know. I held up the will, the real one, dated 6 months before Dad died. This might interest you? Brad's face went white as he read the first line. What is it? Monica demanded. I smiled for the first time all day. It's Dad's real will, the one that leaves everything to me. Brad snatched the will from my hands, his face turning red as he read. This is fake. Dad would never. Keep reading, I said. His voice shook as he read aloud. I leave my entire estate, including the family home at 847 Maple Street, my business interests, and all financial assets, to my daughter Poppy Marie O'Connor. Monica grabbed the document. When was this written? 6 months before he died, Lloyd answered. It's properly witnessed and notarized. Sylvia stood up so fast she knocked over her wineglass. That's impossible. Ray showed us the will. Brad inherited everything. Ray lied. The room erupted. Monica started screaming about lawyers and fraud. Brad paced back and forth, running his hands through his hair. The photographer had finally stopped taking pictures and was quietly packing his equipment. Where's Ray now? Sylvia demanded. Good question. I pulled out my phone and dialed his number. It went straight to voicemail. Ray, it's Poppy. I found Dad's real will, the one you've been hiding for 7 years. Call me back or I'm filing fraud charges tomorrow. I hung up and looked at their shocked faces. He knew, Sylvia whispered. Ray knew about this will and never said anything. He was paid not to say anything, Lloyd said. I have bank records showing payments from your account to his firm. $50,000, paid in installments over 7 years. Brad stopped pacing. You're saying we paid him to hide evidence that we weren't supposed to inherit anything? That's exactly what I'm saying. Monica collapsed onto the couch, her perfect makeup running down her cheeks. We're ruined. Completely ruined. The business loans, the credit cards, the second mortgages, it was all based on assets we never legally owned, Brad said, his voice hollow. My phone rang. Ray's name flashed on the screen. Answer it, Sylvia said. Put it on speaker. I swiped to accept the call and hit speakerphone. Poppy, I can explain. Explain what, Ray? How you've been stealing from me for 7 years? It wasn't stealing, it was complicated. Complicated? Brad shouted into the phone. You told us we inherited everything. You did inherit everything, according to the will I filed with the court. The fake will, I said. The will your father asked me to file. He changed his mind about leaving everything to you, Poppy. He was angry about your mother, about the divorce. Bullshit. The word came out sharper than I intended. I have his letter, Ray. He told me about the real will. He told me you had it. Silence on the other end. Ray? Sylvia's voice was dangerous. Is this true? Your husband was dying. He wasn't thinking clearly. He kept changing his will, back and forth, leaving everything to Brad one day, to Poppy the next. I had to make a judgment call. You had to make a judgment call. I laughed, but there was no humour in it. You decided to steal my inheritance and cover it up for 7 years. I was protecting the family. Which family? Brad demanded. Because you sure as hell weren't protecting us. Do you know how much debt we're in? How much we owe based on assets we apparently never owned? That's not my fault. I told you to be conservative with your spending. Monica stood up, mascara streaked down her face like war paint. Conservative? You told us we were millionaires. You were millionaires. The business was worth... The business Brad ran into the ground, I interrupted. The business that should have been mine. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. Everything okay in there? I can hear shouting from the driveway. Ray, I said, you have 24 hours to turn over all documents related to my father's estate. Every will, every codicil, every piece of paper you've been hiding. Poppy, please, we can work something out. I have a family. A practice. You should have thought about that before you decided to play God with my life. I hung up and looked around the room. Brad was sitting on the floor next to the broken wine glass. Monica was crying into her hands. Sylvia stared at the Christmas tree like she was seeing it for the first time. So, what happens now? Sylvia asked quietly. Now you pack your things and leave my house. Where are we supposed to go? Monica sobbed. That's not my problem. Brad looked up at me, and for a moment I saw the scared little boy who used to hide behind his mother when Dad raised his voice. Poppy, please, we're family. Family? I walked over to where he sat. Family doesn't forge dead fathers' signatures. Family doesn't steal inheritances. Family doesn't lock stepchildren out of their own homes. We never locked you out. You changed the locks the day Dad died. I drove 4 hours from college to find my key didn't work anymore. Sylvia's face crumpled. That was for security. The house was worth so much. It was my home. The photographer cleared his throat. Should I still send you the photos? Everyone turned to stare at him. Actually, I said, yes. Send them all to me. I want to remember this day. Lloyd closed his briefcase. I'll file the eviction papers tomorrow morning. You have 30 days. 30 days until Christmas, Monica whispered. Merry Christmas, I said, and walked out of my house. The contractors arrived at 7 a.m. sharp on Monday morning. I stood in the driveway, watching Brad load suitcases into his BMW, while Monica screamed at him about storage units and hotel costs. You said we had time to figure this out. I thought we did. How was I supposed to know she had this kind of money? The lead contractor, a woman named Carmen, who'd worked on 3 of my previous flips, walked up with her clipboard. Where do you want us to start? Master bedroom. Rip out everything. New flooring, new paint, new fixtures. I want no trace of them left. Carmen nodded and signalled to her crew. They started unloading equipment from their trucks. Sylvia appeared in the doorway, still in her bathrobe. You can't start construction while we're still living here. Actually, I can. It's my house. We have rights. Tenant rights. You're not tenants. You're trespassers who've been living here illegally for 7 years. Lloyd pulled up in his sedan and got out carrying a thick folder. Morning, Poppy. How's the move-out going? Slowly. He walked over to where Sylvia stood in the doorway. Mrs. O'Connor, I have some additional paperwork for you. What now? Lawsuit. Poppy's suing you, your son, and Ray for fraud, theft, and conversion of assets. 7 years of stolen inheritance, plus interest and damages. Sylvia's face went white. How much? $2.3 million. Monica dropped the box she was carrying. We don't have $2 million. Then you'll have to liquidate assets. Cars, jewelry, investments. What investments? Brad laughed bitterly. We mortgaged everything to keep the business afloat. I walked past them into the house. The contractors were already pulling up carpet in the master bedroom. Underneath was the original hardwood flooring my parents had installed when I was 10. My phone rang. Zoe's name on the screen. How's the first day of home ownership? Loud. Monica's having a breakdown in the driveway. Good. She deserves it. Did you see her Facebook post? What Facebook post? She's claiming you're mentally unstable and stole the house through legal manipulation. She's asking for donations to help them fight this injustice. I laughed. How's that working out for her? 3 people donated. Total of $47. I walked upstairs to my old bedroom. Monica's office furniture was still there, but someone had spray-painted thief across the white desk. Zoe, did you? Not me, but I have my suspicions about who did. I opened the closet door. All of Monica's designer clothes were gone, but tucked in the back corner was something I'd forgotten about. A shoebox full of my childhood drawings and report cards. I found something. What? My old drawings, the ones I thought Sylvia threw away. I pulled out a crayon drawing of our family. Me, Mum, and Dad standing in front of the house. I'd written "my family" across the top in purple crayon. Dad must have hidden them before he died. He knew what was coming. I heard shouting from downstairs. Through the window, I could see Brad arguing with one of the contractors. I need to go deal with this. I hung up and went downstairs. Brad was standing in the living room, red-faced and gesturing wildly. You can't just tear apart someone's home. Carmen looked at me. Boss, this guy's interfering with our work. Brad, you need to leave. This is insane. You're destroying everything Dad built. Dad built this house for his family, his real family. I was his family too. Were you? Because I remember a lot of times when you pretended not to know me. When your friends came over, when Sylvia had her dinner parties, when you needed someone to blame for breaking something. Brad's shoulders sagged. That was different. We were kids. You were 23 when Dad died. Old enough to know better? Monica appeared in the doorway, her eyes red from crying. The hotel wants a credit card for incidentals. All our cards are maxed out. That's not my problem. Please, Poppy. We'll pay you back. Everything we owe, plus interest. Just give us time. How? Brad's business is bankrupt. You haven't worked in 5 years. Sylvia's living on Social Security. We'll figure something out. I walked to the mantel and picked up a framed photo of my father. The last one taken before he got sick. You want to know what Dad told me the last time I saw him alive? They both stared at me. He said he was sorry. Sorry for letting Sylvia convince him to change his will. Sorry for not protecting me from you. Sorry for being too weak to stand up to his new wife. That's not true, Sylvia said from the doorway. Isn't it? You manipulated a dying man into cutting out his own daughter. You convinced him I didn't deserve his legacy because I reminded him too much of my mother. Your mother was a... Careful! My voice went cold. You're standing in my house, talking about my mother. Choose your words wisely. Sylvia closed her mouth. Carmen cleared her throat. Boss, we need to know about the kitchen. Full renovation or just updates? I looked around the room one more time, at the people who'd stolen 7 years of my life, at the house that should have been mine all along. Full renovation. I want everything new. Even the cabinets your father custom built? Monica asked quietly. Especially those. The house was finally quiet. 3 months of construction had transformed every room, erasing the last traces of Sylvia's redecorating and Monica's Instagram-worthy staging. I stood in the kitchen, running my hand along the new granite countertops, when my phone buzzed. Zoe's text included a screenshot. Brad's working at Henderson & Associates now, mid-level position. Guess who's his boss? The photo showed Brad in a cheap suit, standing behind a desk that looked like it came from a government surplus store. His LinkedIn profile listed him as Junior Account Manager. I texted back, What happened to Monica? Divorce finalized last week. She's living with her sister in Ohio. Posted a GoFundMe for starting over after financial abuse. How much did she raise? $200. I poured myself coffee from the new machine and walked to the living room. The afternoon sun streamed through windows that no longer had Sylvia's heavy drapes blocking the light. The doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Ray standing on my porch, holding an envelope. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 3 months. I opened the door, but didn't invite him in. Poppy, I need to talk to you. We have nothing to discuss. Please, just 5 minutes. He looked pathetic standing there in his wrinkled suit, so I stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind me. What do you want, Ray? I'm losing my practice. The state bar is investigating. My wife left me. My kids won't return my calls. Good. I know you hate me, but I need you to understand. Understand what? That you stole my inheritance and covered it up for 7 years? Your father was confused at the end. The medication, the pain, he wasn't thinking clearly. He was clear enough to write me a letter explaining exactly what you did. Ray's hands shook as he held out the envelope. These are the original documents. every will, every codicil, every piece of paper related to your father's estate. I'm turning them all over to you." I took the envelope but didn't open it. "There's something else," he said quietly. "The business. Your father's company." Brad ran it into the ground, but the client list, the contracts, the reputation, it's all still worth something. "How much?" "Maybe $500,000, if someone knew how to rebuild it." "Someone like me?" "You have your father's mind for business, and his stubbornness." I studied his face. "What's the catch?" "No catch. I'm trying to make amends. The business assets are legally yours anyway, according to the real will." "And Brad?" "Brad doesn't know yet. He thinks the company's completely worthless." My phone rang. Zoe's name on the screen. "I need to take this." Ray nodded and started walking toward his car. "Poppy, you need to see the news. Channel 7, right now." I went back inside and turned on the TV. A reporter stood outside a familiar-looking office building. "Financial fraud investigation has resulted in multiple arrests, including prominent attorney Raymond Simmons, who allegedly helped clients hide assets and forge legal documents." The camera cut to Ray being led away in handcuffs. My phone rang again. This time it was Lloyd. "Did you see the news?" "Just watched Ray get arrested." "There's more. The FBI found evidence that he was running similar scams with other clients. You weren't his only victim." "How many others?" "At least 12 families. The investigation's been going on for months." I sat down on my new couch, the one that didn't smell like Sylvia's perfume or Monica's designer candles. "What does this mean for me?" "It means you're going to get a lot more than just your house back. Ray had offshore accounts, hidden assets, properties he bought with stolen money. When they liquidate everything, you'll be first in line for restitution." "How much?" "Conservative estimate? $3 to $4 million. I hung up and walked to the window. Across the street, Mrs. Patterson was working in her garden, the same woman who used to give me cookies when I was little, and Sylvia was too busy to notice I hadn't eaten lunch. The doorbell rang again. This time it was Sylvia. She looked smaller somehow, older. Her designer clothes had been replaced with a plain dress that had seen better days. "May I come in?" "No." "Please, Poppy, I just want to see the house one more time." "Why?" "Because I lived here for 7 years. Because your father loved this place." "My father loved me too. That didn't stop you from stealing my inheritance." Tears started running down her cheeks. "I was scared. After Robert died, I was terrified of being alone, of having nothing. So you took everything from me instead. I know I was wrong. I know I hurt you. But I loved your father, and I thought—" "You thought what? That I didn't deserve his love because I reminded you that you weren't his first wife?" She nodded, unable to speak. "You were right about one thing, Sylvia. I am like my mother. She taught me that when people show you who they really are, you should believe them." I started to close the door, then stopped. "The guest room you used to let me stay in? I'm turning it into an office. For the business, I'm starting with Dad's client list." Her face crumpled. "Goodbye, Sylvia." I closed the door and turned the deadbolt. My house, my rules, my life. Finally.
My name is Juniper Lowell, and for as long as I can remember, I've been treated as the shadow of my sister's light. Every holiday, every family gathering, I was reminded that I wasn't enough, especially after I walked away from the man they adored, my ex. They said I had ruined my own life, that I would never measure up. That wound stayed with me, raw and unhealed, until one winter night at the dinner table when their cruelest words collided with the truth I had carried in silence for far too long. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to share where you're tuning in from. We love seeing how our stories connect people from all around the world. Your comments and thoughts bring this community to life, and we're so grateful to have you on this journey with us. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, grab a cozy seat, maybe a cup of coffee or tea, and prepare yourself for a tale that will captivate your heart from beginning to end. Let's begin. The moment I stepped through the doorway, the air was thick with the smell of roasted turkey, cinnamon, and wine. My mother's table gleamed under the chandelier, every fork and glass arranged with military precision. On the surface, It looked like warmth, a holiday family gathering, but for me, it felt like walking into a pressure chamber. I found my place at the table, smoothing the napkin across my lap, reminding myself to breathe evenly. The chair beside me stayed empty, Nathaniel's absence like a spotlight on my vulnerability. He had promised he'd come as soon as work allowed. But until then, I sat alone among people who knew far too well how to use silence as a weapon. The conversation swirled around me. Evelyn's laughter, my mother's fussing over the food, my father's gruff jokes. I kept my head down, sipping water, waiting for the evening to pass without drawing fire. But that hope didn't last long. My father leaned back in his chair, wine glass in hand, and with a smirk that suggested he thought he was being clever, he delivered the line. "If you had managed to hold on to John," he said, "things would be different now." The room froze for a fraction of a second. Forks hung midair, wine glasses paused. Evelyn's smile widened, bright and sharp, while a ripple of uneasy laughter broke out along the table. I didn't move. My lips curved into what must have looked like a polite smile. But under the table, my hand gripped the napkin so tightly the fabric twisted hard against my palm. I had been here before, in this exact role. Quiet, contained, swallowing down words I knew no one wanted to hear. And in that silence, I felt it again. The familiar sting of being reduced to a failure in front of the people who were supposed to call me their own. Evelyn never missed a chance to turn the spotlight onto herself. And that night, she did it by polishing John's memory until it gleamed. She lifted her glass, her voice ringing with practiced ease. "John's running a major investment fund now. I hear he's traveling constantly. New York, London, even Zurich. He dines with people who make headlines. He's really living the life." The admiration came quickly. Aunts, uncles, cousins nodded in unison, their eyes widening as though they were hearing about a celebrity. "Remarkable," one murmured. Another whispered, "Always knew he'd go far." Their voices circled the table like applause. I sat perfectly still, pretending to be engaged, while every word chipped away at me. It was as though my past had been turned into their favorite parlor trick, something to laugh over, to measure me against, again and again. Then Uncle Raymond broke the rhythm. He cleared his throat, his brow furrowing. "Funny," he said slowly. "I heard he had to sell his big house last year. Some bad deal. Debts. Maybe?" The shift was immediate. Forks paused. The chatter stalled. For a second, the crack in Evelyn's story opened wide. My chest tightened, hope flickering that someone else saw the truth. But Evelyn was quick. She threw her head back with a bright, dismissive laugh. "Oh, Uncle, you know how people gossip. Selling a house isn't failure. It's strategy. John's smarter than anyone here gives him credit for." Laughter trickled back, hesitant at first, then steady, following Evelyn's lead. The crack sealed itself. I clenched the napkin in my lap. Once again, the truth was smothered by her charm. The meal carried on, dishes passed around, but the conversation had shifted towards something more personal. My mother leaned forward, her tone soft yet cutting. "I actually saw John at a fundraising gala not long ago. He looked so polished, so successful. Honestly, he seemed born to thrive in that world." Her words sank into me like old splinters. It wasn't just about John. It was about every moment I'd grown up with walls covered in Evelyn's, certificates, while my own small victories gathered dust in boxes, childhood birthdays where my gifts were compared, teenage years where my choices were weighed against hers. I had lived a lifetime of coming up short in my own home. Evelyn's eyes gleamed, catching the cue like a practiced performer. She set her glass down with a flourish and turned to me, smiling sweetly. "If you hadn't been foolish enough to leave John, you wouldn't be stuck here with a husband who barely registers on anyone's radar." The words detonated at the table. A few cousins chuckled uncomfortably. Others shifted in their seats, eyes flicking to me, then away. My cheeks burned, but I held my head steady. I wanted to speak, to defend myself, to defend Nathaniel. But I knew better. In this house, truth was never welcome from me. So I stayed silent, pressing the storm deeper into my chest. Let them laugh. Let them compare. I had learned the hard way that silence could be sharper than any retort. The dinner table had stopped feeling like a place to share a meal. It had turned into a courtroom, with Evelyn acting as the star prosecutor. Every story she told about John became another piece of evidence against me. "He's consulting on million-dollar projects now," she said with a satisfied smirk. "Important people trust him." A few cousins leaned in, nodding eagerly, happy to play her jury. "He's brilliant," one said. "Not everyone has that kind of drive." Their approval echoed around the table like a chorus. Across from them, a few relatives stayed silent, eyes down on their plates, unwilling to challenge Evelyn, but unwilling to back her either. The room was split, and I was in the middle, the accused who didn't even have a chance to defend herself. And then my father slipped. "Cutting into his turkey," he muttered almost casually. Well, I can't deny John had vision. I even listened to his advice on an investment once. The words dropped like a stone in water. The table went still. My pulse raced. So that was it. The real reason John's name still carried so much weight here. Pride, money, and the hope of profit tied my family to him. And to keep believing in John was to keep believing in their own judgment. I gripped my napkin tighter. They weren't just defending John. They were defending themselves. And once again, I was the sacrifice to keep the illusion alive. I barely heard the chatter that followed, because my mind had pulled me backward in time. I was standing in our old apartment, watching John shove papers into drawers, spreadsheets flashing numbers I wasn't meant to see. "Just a temporary setback," he had told me, with that practiced smile. "The money's coming in next month. You'll see." But the money never came. Only excuses. Only lies. The clink of silver snapped me back. Evelyn's voice cut sharp as glass. If Juniper hadn't thrown him away, imagine where she'd be now. Her gaze slid to the empty chair beside me. Nathaniel's absence became her weapon, and a ripple of uneasy laughter followed. Then it happened. My cousin raised his phone to snap a picture of the turkey. The screen lit up, and the headline was impossible to ignore. Horizon Fund under federal investigation. Advisor John. Wallace named. His eyes widened. But before he could read more, Evelyn snatched the phone from his hand with a forced laugh. "Oh, don't ruin dinner with fake news," she said, waving it off. The laughter that followed was thinner this time. Nervous. I could feel the cracks forming in her polished story. And for once, I wasn't the only one who saw them. Just then, my phone buzzed under the table. A message from Nathaniel lit the screen. "I'm on my way. Sorry I'm late." Relief surged through me like air after drowning. For the first time that evening, I felt the tide was about to turn. The doorbell rang just as Evelyn's voice reached its sharpest edge. For a moment, everyone froze, forks hovering in midair. Then the front door opened, and Nathaniel stepped inside. Snow clung to his dark coat, his presence steady and unshakable. My chest loosened as if I could finally breathe. He greeted everyone politely before sliding into the empty chair beside me. Without drama, he reached into his coat and placed a thick envelope on the table. His voice was calm, but carried a weight that silenced the room. "I think it's time to clear a few things up." Evelyn laughed, brittle and high-pitched. "Here we go. Another attempt to make yourself look important." But Nathaniel opened the envelope, spreading papers across the table, court documents, financial reports, a printed notice from the SEC. There, bold and undeniable, was the name John Wallace. Fraud. Investigation. Federal inquiry. The air snapped tight. Silverware stopped clinking. For a heartbeat. No one breathed. Then Evelyn's face flushed crimson. "This is ridiculous. Lies! You'll do anything to drag him down." Her voice shook, shrill against the silence. But the papers didn't move. The truth sat there, heavier than her rage. Nathaniel didn't argue. He simply took out his phone, tapped the screen, and laid it on the table. A news site glowed bright. Federal investigation launched into Horizon Fund. Advisor John Wallace. Named in official report. It was public, undeniable, impossible to dismiss as rumor. Evelyn's hands trembled as she twisted her napkin. Her laugh sounding more like a gasp. Headlines exaggerate. They always do. And then my father broke. He stared down at his plate, voice low and uneven. "I invested with John. He told me it was safe." The admission cracked the room wide open. Gasps followed, and one by one, others confessed. An aunt, A cousin, money lost, trust betrayed. The dominoes fell quickly, shame replacing the admiration that once floated so easily around John's name. I sat quietly, my heart steady for the first time that night. The room had shifted. Evelyn's mask was slipping, and no one was willing to hold it up for her anymore. The weight of Nathaniel's papers and the glow of his phone still lingered on the table, heavy enough to silence the room. For a heartbeat, I thought maybe it was over. Maybe silence itself had won. But Evelyn couldn't stand the quiet. She shot to her feet, her chair screeching against the floor. "This is what you do! Juniper!" she screamed, pointing at me with a trembling hand. "You've spent your entire life pretending you're some kind of victim. Poor Juniper, always overlooked, always mistreated, never your fault, always someone else's. You hide behind excuses, behind your husband now, just like you've always hidden. You are pathetic." Her words sliced through the air, louder and sharper than the crackle of the fireplace. My relatives shifted in their chairs, glancing between her flushed face and my calm one. But this time, no one joined her chorus. Then, softly, a voice rose from the far end of the table. My cousin Marlene, usually Evelyn's most loyal echo, whispered, I invested too, and I lost more than I can admit to my husband." Her eyes brimmed with tears as she lowered her gaze. The shift was immediate. Evelyn's mouth snapped shut, her anger suddenly fragile. The table no longer carried her momentum. The fortress she had built with smug smiles and cutting remarks was crumbling, stone by stone. I hadn't moved through her tirade. My hands rested lightly in my lap, but inside me, a storm settled into something steadier, colder. Slowly, I lifted my napkin from my lap, smoothed its wrinkles, and placed it deliberately onto the table. The whisper of fabric against wood was soft, but it carried further than Evelyn's shouting. Every eye turned toward me. Evelyn's face flushed deeper, but she froze, caught by the stillness. I lifted my head, meeting her glare with something far stronger than anger. Clarity. I will say this once. My voice wasn't raised, but it echoed in the silence. A gavel falling in a courtroom that had waited years for the verdict. Breath caught around the table. I could feel it. The anticipation, the fear, the undeniable pull of truth about to be spoken. The night had reached its peak, and for the first time, everyone knew I wasn't the victim anymore. The silence was unbearable. Everyone's eyes were on me, waiting to see if I would crumble or finally speak. My fingers released the last fold of the napkin, and I drew in a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "My life," I said slowly, each word cutting through the air like glass, "is not a competition with the past, and my marriage. It doesn't need anyone's approval to matter. I don't need recognition from this table to know I'm living right." The room went still. Even Evelyn, with her lips parted in fury, couldn't form a reply. My words weren't loud, but they carried with a finality that no one could argue against. For once, my silence had turned into strength. Then Nathaniel's calm voice filled the space I had cleared. "For those of you who invested with John, you are not powerless. I can help you connect with independent counsel, attorneys who specialize in fraud recovery. You have the right to fight for your money back, and I'll make sure you're not alone in that process." The reaction was immediate. Shocked glances flew across the table, but this time they weren't directed at me. Whispers started, threads of hope and fear tangled together. And then someone spoke aloud what others were only just realizing. "Wait," an uncle said quietly. "Aren't you the one who co-authored that forensic report with the Tribune?" "I remember reading your name." Nathaniel inclined his head. Unpretentious but steady. "Yes, I teach forensic accounting at the university. I've worked with regulators and journalists on cases like this before. That's why I knew what to look for with John." Gasps rippled. The room shifted again, but not against me. This time, it shifted against Evelyn, against the illusion she had clung to. I sat taller, my breath steady. One sentence had been enough. The verdict was already written. The weight of the room pressed against me, but for the first time in years, it didn't crush me. It rolled off, like water sliding down glass. I glanced at Nathaniel, his steady eyes holding mine, and without a word, we both pushed back our chairs. The sound echoed through the dining room, sharp, final, unmistakable. I rose to my feet, smoothing the napkin I had laid down, then left it on the table like a marker of closure. "Thank you for the meal," I said simply. No sarcasm, no anger, just an ending. The room stayed frozen. Evelyn sat slumped in her chair, her once perfect poise reduced to fragments. Her hands clutched the napkin she'd twisted into knots, her face lowered so far she couldn't meet a single pair of eyes. Around her, the family sat in silence. No more laughter, no more applause, only the heavy reality of the papers still spread across the table. Damning and undeniable. Nathaniel took my hand, firm and reassuring, and together we walked toward the door. Each step felt like shedding another layer of the weight I'd carried my entire life. We reached the entryway, and I opened the door. The night air rushed in, crisp and cold. Swirling into the room, the gust fanned the flames in the fireplace, making them leap higher, casting jagged shadows on the walls. A few sheets of the court documents stirred, their corners lifting as if the truth itself refused to be buried again. I stepped through the doorway, pulling my coat tighter, Nathaniel beside me. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Behind me was a table full of silence and shame, bound by denial. Ahead was clean air, open night, and the kind of peace that only comes when you finally walk away. That was the moment I understood what had taken me so long to learn. Truth doesn't need to shout. To be real, worth doesn't need to be proven through comparison. And real maturity, the kind no award on a wall can measure, is knowing when to step out of a toxic game that was never worth playing. I walked forward lighter, freer, no longer defined by anyone else's shadow. For the first time, I belonged fully to myself. There comes a point in every life where silence speaks louder than noise, where truth proves itself not through arguments, but through presence. In those moments, the weight of comparison and judgment falls away, leaving only the clarity of who we are and what truly matters. So much of human pain is born from the belief that we must prove our worth to others, that our value is measured by recognition, applause, or someone else's approval. But the truth is far quieter and far more enduring. Worth is not a contest. It cannot be given by another, nor can it be taken away. It exists in the choices we make when no one is watching, in the boundaries we set, and in the courage to walk away from what diminishes us. To step out of comparison is not an act of surrender. It is an act of freedom. It is the decision to no longer play by rules designed to keep us small. And in that freedom, one discovers a deeper kind of strength, the strength to live authentically, to protect one's peace, and to define success not by others' standards, but by one's own truth. The lesson is simple, but not easy. Sometimes, it means letting go of the need to win arguments. Sometimes, it means releasing relationships built on control or denial. And sometimes, it simply means standing tall in the quiet knowledge that your dignity is intact, even if no one else acknowledges it. In the end, truth does not require noise. It doesn't need to shout or demand attention. It remains steady and unshaken, long after the echoes of pride and denial fade. And when the moment comes to choose between clinging to a toxic game or stepping into peace, the bravest act is to walk away. Thank you for joining us in this story. We'd love to hear your reflections. What part of this journey resonated with you most? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your voices are what make this community so meaningful. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story filled with resilience, revelation, and the kind of truth that lingers long after the final word. I'm Briar Kensington, and the first laugh landed before the waiter set down the bread. My sister tilted her champagne flute toward the chandelier, catching light on her new ring like she was signaling a lighthouse. Briar does admin, Vanessa sang, a sugar-sweet barb that made our mother smile, and our father clear his throat as if agreement. Could be polite. The room smelled like butter and ocean, Manhattan oysters, lemon, cold air every time the maitre d' opened the door. I folded my napkin across my lap and stared at the salt crystals on the rim of my glass, counting them instead of the stares. Across the table, Ethan Cole, her fiancé, watched me without practiced boredom I knew so well. Admin, Vanessa repeated, resting her chin on his shoulder. Spreadsheets and paper clips. She laughed. Others followed, the kind of laughter that tests how much of you is left when people think you're small. Ethan lifted his glass but didn't drink. What do you actually do, Briar? His voice was curious, like he'd noticed the part of the painting everyone else walked past. I set my water down so it wouldn't ring the crystal. I make decisions, I said, meeting his eyes, the kind people prefer to notice after they're done. A ripple passed through the table, the brief confusion that comes when a script doesn't read as expected. My mother reached for the bread basket. Vanessa rolled her eyes and launched back into seating charts, beaches, a dress with French seams. The waiter leaned in to ask about entrees. I ordered halibut and felt the small, familiar click inside me, the one that turns noise into distance. It wasn't anger. It was the hour before a storm, the way the air changes. No one knew the forecast had shifted. The first time I realized my family had already chosen their favorite, I was 9. Vanessa had spilled grape juice on our mother's silk scarf, and when the stain spread into a purple blossom, it was my name that was called. Briar, you should have been watching her. I stood there, small fists balled at my sides, wondering how I was meant to guard a sister only a year younger than me, wondering why no one cared that she'd laughed as she tipped the glass. That pattern never faded. By the time we were teenagers, our father praised Vanessa's every piano recital, even when she missed notes, while my debate trophies collected dust in the hallway cabinet. Our mother hung Vanessa's portraits, glossy images from early modeling gigs, along the staircase. My certificates, if they made it out of the drawer, ended up in the study under a pile of old mail. At birthdays and Christmas dinners, the bias became sharper, dressed up as banter. Vanessa is our dreamer, my mother would say, touching her pearls. And Briar? Well, she's practical. Practical was code for plain, safe, forgettable. I smiled through it, the same way I learned to carry trays of hors d'oeuvres at family parties, while Vanessa posed with guests, her laughter louder than the music. One Thanksgiving, I'd baked an apple pie from scratch, the crust golden, the filling warm with cinnamon. Vanessa arrived late carrying a store-bought cake in a glossy box. Everyone reached for her cake first. My father declared it delightful, though it was still half frozen in the center. I remember staring at the untouched pie, the steam fading until it looked cold and tired, much like I felt. It wasn't only food or gifts. It was the invisible hierarchy at every gathering. Vanessa sat at the center of the table, glowing with approval. I hovered at the edges, asked to pour wine, clear plates, run errands. No one questioned why she never lifted a finger. It was simply expected that I would. But beneath the weight of those small humiliations, a seed of silence grew. I learned to stop expecting applause. Instead, I built a private world of notebooks, plans, ideas that no one cared to ask about. If I spoke of ambition, it was brushed off as too serious or not fun. So I stopped sharing. What they didn't see, what they never tried to see, was that every dismissal pushed me further, inward, toward a place where I didn't need their validation. They thought they were defining me as the background sister, the reliable one. In truth, they were hardening something they couldn't name. And in that silence, in the shadow where they left me, I started to shape the person who would one day make them pause mid-laughter and wonder what they'd missed. By the time Vanessa turned 21, the small cuts had become routine, so ingrained that even she didn't notice when she twisted the knife. She borrowed my car for a photo shoot one summer morning, leaving me stranded outside my apartment in the sticky July heat. When she finally returned, the tank was empty, a lipstick print smeared on the visor, and she laughed when I frowned at the coffee stain blooming across the passenger seat. Relax, Briar. It's just a Toyota. I was late that day, 40 minutes late, to a meeting that decided the future of a project I had been building for months. No one at home asked how it went. Vanessa only wanted to know if I could lend her my jacket for cocktails that evening. Christmas wasn't kinder. Vanessa unwrapped a designer bag from our parents, the leather still gleaming under the tree lights. From Ethan, even then just her boyfriend, came a necklace that sparkled like it had its own power source. I opened my box to find a planner. Plain black leather, neat little corners. Vanessa snorted so loudly that the cousins giggled with her. A planner? God, Briar, your whole personality is office supplies. I remember tracing the embossed initials on the cover, whispering, "It's perfect," though no one heard me. They didn't know that inside those blank pages, I would chart the first outlines of something none of them could imagine. Her entitlement grew bolder as the wedding plans consumed her life. At 2 in the morning, she called, slurring words after a party, insisting I rewrite her resume for a magazine feature. "You're good with that admin stuff," she said. When I reminded her I had an early meeting, she snapped, "It's not like your job matters." So I stayed up until dawn, reshaping her resume while my presentation slides blinked on another screen. That same day, fueled by nothing but coffee, I stood before a boardroom and outlined a strategy that would change the direction of our entire fund. By the time she texted me later to say thanks, no emoji, no warmth, the deal was already moving forward. The bridal shower should have been a bridge, a chance to find laughter together. Instead, Vanessa announced to her friends, "Briar can handle the decorations and cleanup. She's amazing at organizing papers." Laughter spilled around the room as I adjusted the flower centerpieces, nodding politely, even as I balanced acquisition documents worth millions on my phone. Each moment chipped away at something fragile, but also sharpened me. They thought they were keeping me small. What they were really doing was giving me reason after reason to step out of their frame, to build something that didn't need their spotlight. And yet, despite every slight, I kept showing up. Maybe out of duty. Maybe out of hope that one day they'd see me clearly. What I didn't know then was that the moment of clarity was already on the horizon, waiting for the right dinner, the right question, the right silence to crack everything open. The truth of who I was never lived at that dinner table. It lived in the quiet hours, the ones no one in my family bothered to imagine for me. They assumed I went home to a bland apartment, microwave dinners, and piles of paperwork. What they never saw was the skyline outside my office window at midnight, Manhattan glowing like circuitry, while I studied contracts and market reports until my eyes blurred. I had spent nearly a decade climbing in finance, starting as an analyst where no one knew my name. I learned to sit quietly in conference rooms filled with men twice my age, absorbing the language of leverage, valuations, and exit strategies. While Vanessa polished her smile for photo shoots, I polished presentations that convinced billion-dollar investors to bet on emerging technologies. It wasn't glamorous, not in the way her world was, but it was power. Quiet, precise, undeniable. 3 years earlier, when the chance came to form my own fund, I signed the papers without telling my family. I named it Hartwell Capital, after a small street where I'd rented my first apartment with peeling paint and too thin walls. That apartment had been a reminder that beginnings don't predict endings, and I wanted that memory etched into every decision I made. I built a team who believed in the same silence I did, work that spoke louder than noise. We specialized in health tech startups, the kind of companies that could change how hospitals treated patients, how families afforded care. While my parents sighed at my unimportant job, I was negotiating across oceans, arranging partnerships in Singapore, Berlin, Toronto. There were clues, if anyone had cared to look. The sleek card in my wallet, plain except for my name. The calls I excused myself to take during family dinners. Conversations in clipped language about due diligence or regulatory approval. To them, it was always some friend or maybe a boyfriend I was being secretive about. No one ever leaned closer. No one ever asked. Sometimes I wondered if I should tell them. Then I'd remember the planner under the Christmas tree. The mocking laughter. The eye rolls when I said I had to work. Why hand them pieces of myself when they'd only twist them into jokes? So I kept the truth close, letting their dismissal become a shield. Every time they reduced me to admin, I thought of the numbers on my laptop screen, the signatures waiting for my approval, the lives that would be changed by the investments we made. They didn't know it, but each sneer pushed me further into the fortress I was building. And by the time Vanessa's engagement dinner arrived, that fortress was nearly unshakable. All it needed was a spark, a single question, to reveal itself. The night before Vanessa's engagement dinner, I came home to find my closet door open. Hangers swung empty where my dress should have been. A black silk sheath, simple but elegant. I had chosen it weeks earlier, knowing it was understated enough for me, but still worthy of the kind of restaurant Vanessa insisted on. When she returned it hours later, the dress smelled faintly of perfume and carried a deep red wine stain across the sleeve. She dropped it on my bed without apology. "You wouldn't have worn it anyway," she said, flipping her hair like the matter was settled. "Not like you get invited to important events." I held the fabric in my hands, the stain blooming like an accusation. There was a time I would have cried quietly, hoping she'd notice and feel guilty. Now, I only folded it carefully, set it aside, and reached for another dress. Navy blue, tailored, the one I had worn the day I signed the Hartwell Meditech deal. It wasn't glamorous, but it carried weight no one else in my family could see. That evening, while Vanessa rehearsed her smiles and practiced saying "fiancé" like a crown jewel, I sat at my kitchen table reviewing emails from my executive team. Numbers scrolled across my screen. Projections, regulatory approvals, a press release draft with my name at the bottom. Every line felt like a lifeline to the version of myself I had built from scratch. The contrast was almost comical. In one room, my sister polishing an image for a crowd that already adored her. In another, me polishing strategy that would ripple through global markets by Monday morning. I closed my laptop around midnight and set my phone to charge. A message buzzed in just before the screen went dark. From Jonathan, my head of strategy. "Terms locked. We're ready for announcement." I exhaled slowly. The way you do before stepping into cold air. Tomorrow wasn't about Vanessa's ring or her curated future. Tomorrow was about the truth no one in my family had cared to ask for. As I hung the navy dress on the back of my chair, I realized something. I wasn't nervous. I was steady. Whatever came next, I was ready to let the silence break. The restaurant Vanessa had chosen was the kind of place where the waiters moved like shadows, refilling glasses before they were half empty and gliding away as if they'd never been there. Crystal chandeliers threw shards of light across the white tablecloths, and every laugh at our table seemed to echo a little louder than it should have. Vanessa basked in it. She introduced Ethan to every cousin, every family friend, her hand flashing the diamond ring like a beacon. "He's in finance," she'd whisper loudly enough for the whole table. Very well connected. Every gesture was rehearsed, every moment an advertisement for her own life. I sat 2 seats down, smoothing the navy dress across my lap, watching. My mother leaned over with her habitual smile, the one that hovered between pride and pity. "Not everyone can be ambitious." "Briar," she murmured, almost like she was offering comfort. I pressed my fork against the plate to keep from answering. When conversation turned to careers, Vanessa became the family's spokesperson. "Dad's a surgeon. Mom runs her gallery. I'm in fashion, of course." She tilted her chin toward me, her voice thick with amusement. "And Briar? She does admin work. She's always been the practical one." The laughter was polite, but it still cut. I felt the heat crawl up my neck as I stared at the untouched appetizer in front of me. For a heartbeat, it was the same old script, the same small humiliations. Then Ethan leaned forward, his gaze steady, not mocking. "What do you actually do, Briar?" he asked. The table stilled, forks suspended, wine glasses frozen mid-air. I placed my fork carefully on the edge of the plate so it wouldn't clink. "Strategy," I said simply. "Investment strategy." For a moment, silence pressed in. Then conversation resumed, but softer, glances flicking back toward me, as though my single word had unsettled the choreography of the evening. Ethan's father, seated across from me, narrowed his eyes thoughtfully. The rhythm of the dinner had shifted. They didn't know it yet, but the storm had begun to gather. By the time entrees were cleared, the air around the table felt different. Vanessa was still chattering about destination weddings, Bali, maybe Capri, but her voice skimmed the surface now, trying to reclaim the spotlight. I sipped my wine and let the silence between her words widen. Ethan's father, a man whose name carried weight in the financial press, leaned slightly toward me. "Hartwell Capital," he said quietly, as though testing the sound. "That's your office, isn't it? In the tower on Lexington?" My knife paused against porcelain. I met his gaze, calm, measured. "We moved in 2 years ago. The view's remarkable." His eyes widened just enough for me to notice. Then, louder, for the whole table to hear. "Ethan, Did you know Briar is with Hartwell? The laughter died. Vanessa's smile froze, stretched too tight. She's joking, she said quickly, her hand tightening on Ethan's arm. Briar does admin work downtown. But Ethan's father pressed on, his voice cutting through the room. No, she isn't joking. He studied me, searching for confirmation. You founded Hartwell, didn't you? I set my fork down deliberately. Yes, I said. I did. Gasps rippled around the table, small intakes of breath like glass breaking. Ethan blinked, his composure faltering for the first time. Hartwell just closed the Meditech acquisition, he whispered. That was you? I nodded once. My mother's hand trembled as she reached for her water glass. My father's jaw slackened, the practiced smile gone. Vanessa's face drained of color, her diamond ring suddenly a trinket compared to the weight of my words. For years, they had dismissed me with a single phrase, admin, practical, boring. Tonight, that word was replaced with another, founder. Around us, waiters carried on with quiet efficiency, unaware that an entire family's understanding had shifted in a single breath. I leaned back in my chair, steady. That paperwork you've all been laughing about, I said softly, my eyes on Vanessa, is the work that built Hartwell Capital, and Hartwell now manages over $12 billion in assets. The silence that followed was louder than any applause I'd ever imagined. When the final plates were cleared and the last bottle of wine emptied, the evening no longer belonged to Vanessa. Conversations that once orbited around her ring and her wedding now revolved around me. Questions about market strategies, global partnerships, the logic behind our acquisitions. My father leaned forward, hanging on words he'd never asked me to speak before. My mother, suddenly flustered, whispered to a neighbor at another table, "That's my daughter." The CEO. Vanessa sat rigid, the color gone from her cheeks, her laughter a faint echo swallowed by silence. I didn't gloat, I only answered calmly, as if I had been waiting years not to be noticed, but to finally be seen. For once, their validation didn't matter. The truth had already shifted the room. Outside, waiting for the valet, Vanessa tugged at my arm. "Why didn't you ever tell us?" she demanded, her voice sharp and trembling. I met her eyes steadily. "Because you never asked. You were too busy telling the world who you thought I was." Her lips parted, but no words came. Behind us, headlights swept across the pavement, and my car pulled forward. Not the battered Toyota she once mocked, but a black Mercedes. Her eyes flicked to it, wide with the realization that the sister she had dismissed was not the shadow she believed. As I slid into the driver's seat, she tried again. "You'll speak at the wedding, won't you? I want everyone to know you're—" I smiled faintly, closing the door. "I have a board meeting in Tokyo that week. Some admin work I can't miss." The engine purred to life, and as I drove into the night, I felt a calm I'd never known at any family gathering. For years, I thought I needed their recognition, but the truth was simpler. The empire I'd built spoke louder than their dismissals ever could. Success doesn't always enter with trumpets. Sometimes it arrives quietly, takes a seat at the table, and leaves the room forever changed. I'm Fenella Brooks, and tonight my name sits on a place card halfway down the ballroom, far from the head table where my parents shine. The chandeliers lay soft gold over roses, over Clara's veil, over the silverware I polished as a kid. Daniel squeezes my hand beneath the linen. I tell him I'm fine. I'm not. I'm listening for the sound a life makes when it's rewritten without you. My mother taps a flute with a fork, her smile lacquered and bright. My father rises beside her, posture from a photograph he always wanted to live in. "We have a meaningful gift," she says, fishing a white folder from her clutch as if she's pulling out the moon. "To help Clara and Ethan start their life." A hush gathers, warm and expectant. "We are giving you the family house." For a second, the room forgets to breathe. Then applause blooms, standing, clapping, glasses lifted high. Clara covers her mouth, laughing through tears. Ethan kisses her temple. Cameras flash, and I sit very still, because stillness is the only thing keeping my face from breaking. I hear the number that left my account on the 1st of every month. A tide going out, hear promises that sounded like home until they were spent. My mother doesn't look at me. She never looks where the cost lands. Aunt Louise leans in, voice low. Honey, weren't you the one? I nod once. She stops. Daniel's thumb draws a quiet circle on my palm, a small anchor in a room that has decided the sea is calm. I lift my glass with everyone else. I even smile. But somewhere under the music, a door inside me unlatches. If they can rewrite the past in front of 200 people, I can rewrite the future now. The winter of 2015 is carved into me as sharply as the lines in my father's hands. Back then, the kitchen smelled of oil and old coffee, and the table bore the weight of every bill they couldn't pay. I remember the soft scrape of Dad's chair as he leaned forward, elbows planted, eyes sunk low. They've cut my hours again, he said. And even though he tried to sound matter-of-fact, shame curled his voice tight. Mom rubbed her wrists, the ache from years of sewing hemming her words before she spoke. I can barely finish the orders I have. We're falling behind. Fenella! If we don't catch up soon, the bank will take the house. The words landed heavy, though I had already seen the unopened envelopes stacked by the phone, corners curled from being shuffled and ignored. I was 20-something then. With savings I had guarded like a lifeline. My plan was simple: a down payment for my own condo, a space that belonged only to me. Yet that night their eyes didn't leave me, as if the solution had been sitting at the table all along. Could you help? Dad finally asked, fingers tapping once against his mug. It wasn't just a request. It was the entire roof of my childhood leaning onto my shoulders. I said yes. The first $2,500 left my account the following week. I stared at the confirmation email on my computer screen. Payment received, and felt both pride and dread knotting in my chest. I told myself it was temporary, a few months at most. But months became years. Every first of the month, the payment went out. Property taxes followed, and once even a new water heater. Vacations disappeared. Dinner invitations were quietly declined. My Civic rattled past its 10th birthday, while Clara got a new car for graduating college. There were moments that softened the sacrifice. A box of cinnamon rolls Dad left on my counter one morning without a word. Mom's voice cracking on the phone when she said, "If it weren't for you, we would have lost it." I held on to those scraps as if they were promises. By December 2020, the mortgage was gone. I called Dad, told him we were free. He laughed in disbelief, a short, almost relieved sound. "Guess we can all breathe easier now," he said. I waited for something more, for recognition, for a simple dinner together, for acknowledgement that I had carried the load. None came. Life moved on. Mom repainted the living room, talking about hosting Clara's engagement party there. Dad went fishing with Ethan, the future son-in-law, bragging about how steady the house felt after all these years. And me? I went back to my apartment, where the paint peeled in the hallway and the radiator clanked in the night, telling myself the silence was worth it. That one day, when they handed me the keys, I would finally understand why sacrifice was supposed to be noble. But now, sitting in this ballroom, watching them gift the house away, I realized nobility was never the point. The applause from the head table still rang in my ears as I pushed a piece of salmon around my plate. Everyone else seemed lit from within, faces glowing in the candlelight, wine glasses flashing like they were part of some grand advertisement for family joy. Daniel kept a hand over mine beneath the tablecloth, but I couldn't force the food down. The sweetness of roses in the centerpieces made me nauseous. When the clamor died, Clara floated toward us, her gown sweeping the floor like she had been born to wear it. She bent slightly, her perfume sharp and sugary, her voice pitched in that mock surprised tone she used when she wanted to play innocent. "Can you believe it?" she whispered, eyes steady, daring me to contradict the script she already knew. I smiled, lips tight, and she smirked as if my silence confirmed something. Then she glided away, basking in congratulations from guests who had no idea the house they were cheering for had been bought with years of my life. I took a sip of water, my hand trembling enough to make the ice clink. Out of the corner of my eye, Aunt Louise leaned closer, her voice low. "Fenella, weren't you the one who—" She trailed off when she saw the look on my face. My jaw locked shut. She patted my hand and turned back to her plate. Daniel leaned in. "Did you know?" "No," I whispered, my voice tight as a wire. We stayed through the speeches, the toast, the endless slideshow of Clara and Ethan smiling in golden light. Each flash of the screen felt like another reminder of where I had been placed. Not in the spotlight, not even in the background, but erased. Later, as couples drifted onto the dance floor, Daniel asked if I wanted to leave. My parents were still glowing at the head table. Glasses raised, hands draped proudly over Clara's shoulders, as if she were the crown jewel of their lives. I couldn't ruin their perfect picture. Not tonight. We drove home in silence, the streetlights streaking across the windshield, when Daniel asked again if I wanted to confront them. I shook my head. Not tonight. It's their night. I won't be the one who makes it ugly. He tightened his jaw. They already did. His words settled deep. Weeks later, we sat at the same kitchen table where it had all started years ago. The house smelled of roast and fresh bread. Clara sat across from me, scrolling through her phone as Mom poured wine for everyone. Dad carved the meat with exaggerated precision, like he was cutting into a prize. Halfway through the meal, Mom cleared her throat. Your father and I have been thinking. The big house is too much for us now. Silver Pines would be perfect. Quiet, peaceful. You hardly use it. Fenella. Why not let us stay? I set down my fork slowly. No! The word sliced through the room, sharper than the knife in Dad's hand. He blinked. Clara leaned in, her smile sweet but edged with steel. Come on, Fenella. You barely go there. It's selfish to let it sit empty when Mom and Dad could enjoy it. I met her eyes. It's mine, and I decide who uses it. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. The air around that dinner table never recovered after I said no. My mother tried to smooth it over with another scoop of potatoes and a brittle laugh, but the tension hung like smoke that wouldn't clear. Dad's fork scraped the plate too hard, the sound grating. Clara just kept scrolling through her phone, her smirk widening like she'd won a small battle just by calling me selfish. I went home that night with Daniel's hand firm against the small of my back, a silent promise that I wasn't alone. Still, the echo of their voices followed me, selfish, ungrateful, unreasonable, like they were branding me for daring to protect what was mine. 2 nights later, while I was chopping vegetables for dinner, my phone buzzed with a message from a coworker. She sent only a link and a short note. Thought you should see this. I clicked, and my stomach dropped. There it was, my cabin. Silver Pines, the porch railings I painted one summer, the carved welcome sign I'd hung myself, even the blue ceramic canisters Daniel's sister had given me, sitting on the kitchen counter, listed for sale on a private site. Photos taken recently. Price bold at the top. Contact info not mine. I read the description twice. My hands shaking so hard the knife clattered onto the counter. It was being sold under the name of a distant cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. Someone Dad sometimes called when he needed odd jobs done. The betrayal burned hot, but beneath it was a cold clarity. They hadn't just asked. They had already acted. Daniel came in from the garage and found me staring at my phone. When I showed him, his jaw clenched. This is why I told you to change the locks. They think what's yours is theirs. If you don't draw the line now, they'll keep crossing it. The next morning, I called Claire Miller. We'd sat side by side in English Lit in college, but now she was a real estate attorney downtown. Her voice was brisk but warm when she picked up. And when I explained the situation, she didn't waste time. Bring me the deed, payoff papers, anything with your name on it. Today, if you can. In her office, I slid the folder across her desk. She studied every page, then looked me straight in the eye. Fenella, this cabin is yours alone. Legally, they have no claim, but possession is 9/10 of the law. If they have keys, if they get inside, it will be messy. Change the locks. Get the keys back if you can, and be prepared to enforce your rights if they ignore you. My throat tightened. Enforce? You mean call the police? She didn't flinch. If they break in again, yes. Family or not. I left her office with a locksmith's number in my pocket and a weight in my chest. I hadn't wanted to name, the understanding that I might have to treat my parents like strangers on the wrong side of the law. The first snowfall came early that year, laying a quiet sheet of white over the trees at Silver Pines. I had just finished changing the locks 2 weeks before, each click of the new deadbolts sounding like a vow. For the first time in months, I slept easier, until the night the security alert lit up my phone. "Front door opened," the app read. My chest tightened. Daniel was in the garage, sorting tools. I ran to him, breath short. "Someone's at the cabin." He didn't hesitate, grabbed his jacket, tossed me the keys. The drive up was a blur of headlights carving through the dark. My hands clenched in my lap. When we turned onto the gravel road, blue and red lights pulsed through the trees. A police SUV idled out front. Officer Collins stood near the porch, speaking to two figures I recognized instantly. My parents. My father's hands were on his hips, his jaw set. My mother stood beside a plastic bin at her feet, her lips pressed thin. Collins glanced at me as I stepped out. "Ma'am, are you the owner?" "Yes," I said. Voice steady. "This is my property. They don't have permission to be here." Mom's head snapped toward me. "Fenella, we were just moving some things in before the road's ice over." "You hardly use the place," Dad added. "We thought it would be easier to settle before the snow." "You broke in," I said, my voice sharper than I expected. "Who gave you the key?" Silence. Then Mom folded her arms. "If you had let us stay when we asked, it wouldn't have come to this." Colin's pen scratched against his notepad. He looked at me again. "Do you want to file a formal trespass warning?" The air stung my lungs. Daniel's hand rested warm on my back. I thought of the 5 years of checks, the nights I ate ramen while keeping their house standing, the promises that had evaporated in a ballroom toast. My voice came calm and cold. "Yes." "File it!" Mom let out a harsh breath. "You'll regret this." But as they carried their bins back to the car, taillights fading into the trees, I felt the first shift inside me, the knowledge that some lines, once drawn, could not be erased. The following morning, I woke to a storm of notifications. My mother's Facebook post had gone live at dawn. Our own daughter had us thrown out of a family, cabin like criminals. After everything we've done for her, she turned her back on us. Below it, the comments stacked fast. Old neighbors, cousins, church friends, each one a knife. Ungrateful. Heartless. Shameful. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Daniel set a mug of coffee in front of me. "She made you the villain," he said quietly. "She always does," I whispered. By afternoon, my hands shook too badly to keep scrolling. If I stayed silent, her version would calcify into the truth. My entire life had been narrated by her voice. What I did, what I failed to do, why Clara deserved more. Not this time. I opened my own profile and began to type. The words poured like they'd been waiting for years. From 2015 to 2020, I paid my parents' mortgage, $1,500 a month, plus taxes and repairs, so they wouldn't lose their house. At Clara's wedding, they gifted that same house to her. Weeks later, they demanded my cabin. When I refused, they tried to sell it behind my back. And when I protected what's mine, they broke in. No insults, no drama, just facts. I ended with, "Family matters. So do boundaries. I won't apologize for protecting what's mine." I hovered only a second before pressing post. The shift was immediate. The angry comments slowed, then stopped. Beneath my words, new voices appeared. A cousin messaged privately. "I had no idea. Fenella, I'm sorry." A man who'd worked with Dad wrote publicly, confirming he remembered the layoffs and how Dad admitted I was keeping the roof over their heads by evening. Mom's post vanished. She didn't call, didn't reply. Clara unfriended me quietly. But for the first time in weeks, I could breathe. Daniel sat beside me, scrolling through the reactions. "That's going to sting," he said. "It needed to," I answered. My chest felt lighter than it had in years. Truth, once spoken, couldn't be dragged back into silence. 2 days later, my phone lit up with a call from my cousin Janet. Her voice was careful, as if she was stepping onto thin ice. "I saw your post. Fenella, I didn't know half of that. But I think you should know. Your parents went to Clara's house last week. They asked if they could stay with her for a while." I closed my eyes. "And?" She said no. Told them she and Ethan are barely keeping up. Something about a big property tax bill, repairs on the roof, and Ethan's hours being cut. She didn't want to get dragged into the middle. When I hung up, I sat in silence at the kitchen table. Bills scattered in front of me. I had imagined Clara's life as effortless. The golden path laid smooth. Hearing her struggles should have satisfied something in me. But all I felt was tired. That night, I went for a walk through the neighborhood. Lights glowed warm in the windows of other houses. Little islands of belonging I could see but never touch. My parents had asked me to sacrifice. And I had. Clara had asked for nothing. And everything was given to her anyway. Now, even she was finding the weight of it too much. When I returned home, Daniel was waiting on the porch. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Not vindicated," I said. "Just done." Inside, the quiet settled over us like a blanket. For the first time, I understood there was no version of this story where fairness appeared out of thin air. There was only the line I had drawn, and the choice to keep standing behind it. And that choice felt like the only honest one left. The voicemail came a week later. My mother's voice softened into something almost unrecognizable. "We know we made mistakes. We shouldn't have let it get this far. Please call me back." For a moment I stood in the kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, waiting for the ache of guilt to rise. It never did. Instead, the words sounded like every other half-apology I had grown up with. Too late, too shallow, designed to smooth things over without facing the truth. I pressed delete. After that, the silence became my choice. I changed the locks again, signed a lease with a quiet tenant who treated the cabin like a home instead of a prize. I let my parents' letters sit unopened in a drawer. Clara remained a name in passing. Nothing more. Life narrowed, but it also cleared. One rainy afternoon, Daniel and I drove to the coast. We walked along the wet sand until our shoes filled with water, laughing as the tide chased us back. For the first time in months, I felt light. Not triumphant, not vindicated, simply free. I didn't lose a family. I stepped out of a role that had always cost more than it returned. And in that choice, I found something better than fairness or approval. I found peace. If you've ever had to draw a line with the people who raised you, you know how heavy that first mark feels. But sometimes the line isn't cruelty. Sometimes it's the only way to finally breathe. My name is Opal Harrington, and I learned the sound of freedom in a place that smelled like hay and cinnamon cider. It happened at our family's fall party on a rented horse ranch outside Denver. String lights swung over long tables. Relatives laughed loudly, and my sister, Taryn, rose with a champagne flute and a smile sharp enough to cut rope. "Some people," she said, tilting her glass toward me, "just try too hard to matter." The laugh track she wanted arrived on cue, tight, polite, and practiced. I kept my face still. I slid my phone from my clutch and opened the event app the planner insisted we use. The balance for the night, $12,000, blinked back at me. My thumb hovered, then settled. Cancel authorization. A warning flashed. "Are you sure?" I pressed yes. 5 minutes is a long time when everyone is pretending it isn't. Wind tugged at the table runners. A cousin coughed. The band tuned a guitar and then fell quiet. Across the lawn, the planner's iPad chimed. She looked down, then up at Taryn. Another chime. She hurried over, murmured something. Taryn's smile cracked like sugar glass. My mother's hand found my father's sleeve. My father didn't breathe. Taryn stared at her phone, and the color drained from her face as the notification marched across the screen. Payment revoked. By cardholder. A couple of guests set their forks down as if they might clatter. No one moved first. "Opal," my father whispered, the name barely crossing the linen. "What did you just do?" I felt the tremor in my own ribs. The small quake before a bridge releases pressure, and I let it pass through me. I met his eyes. "I'm done," I said. Quietly, clearly, finally. The music didn't start again. Neither did I. The drive back to Denver that night blurred under the glow of highway lamps, but my mind replayed every second at the ranch in merciless detail. For 2 years, I had been the invisible scaffolding propping up Taryn's carefully curated life. It hadn't begun with $12,000 parties. It started with little things, the kind a sister could excuse. $50 here for props she needed for a photo shoot. A couple hundred for a designer pair of shoes she swore would boost her brand. Then the requests grew teeth: rent for her downtown loft, car payments for the sleek SUV she insisted her followers expected, even the vet bills for her pug, because my audience loves him. Opal, you don't want him sick, do you? And each time she called, my parents' voices chimed in afterward, reminding me how important it was to support her, how family meant sacrifice. I'm a certified public accountant. I know how numbers bleed when they aren't contained. Still, I let mine run like water into her hands. I skipped vacations. I drove the same 10-year-old sedan, patched together with duct tape and stubbornness. My apartment smelled faintly of mildew each winter because I couldn't afford the repairs. Yet every week I wired money that made Taryn's life shimmer online. One evening, about a year ago, I tried to draw a line. I called her, voice shaky but determined, and said maybe she could pick up a part-time job to shoulder a little of her own weight. On the other end of the line came a burst of laughter. Opal, you don't get it. I'm building something real. You crunch numbers. You can't understand art, influence, momentum. Just do what you do best. What I did best, apparently, was vanish into the background while she played star. That memory sat with me as I lay awake in my apartment after the party, ceiling fan whirring like an interrogation lamp. I realized it wasn't just about money. It was about never being seen except as a wallet with a pulse. My parents had molded me into the reliable one, the daughter who never said no. And tonight, when I finally did, their silence had been louder than any accusation. The cancellation at the ranch wasn't an accident. It was the first breath I had taken in years, and deep down, I knew it was only the beginning of what had to change. The morning after the party, my phone lit up with messages like firecrackers. Taryn first, rage dressed as desperation. Fix this now! You embarrassed me in front of everyone. Then my mother, gentler but sharper in its guilt. Opal, you can't just walk out on family. Think about your sister's reputation. My father's was the harshest. A single line. You made us all look bad. I left the phone buzzing on the counter while I brewed, coffee that tasted stronger than my own resolve. For once, I didn't rush to explain myself. For once, I let their words echo without swallowing me whole. Later that afternoon, news traveled faster than the wind in the foothills. A cousin texted that the ranch manager had halted the catering midway, plates of brisket cooling under tin covers, because no balance remained. Guests left early, whispering, Taryn, apparently, tried to spin it as a technical glitch, but no one bought it. The humiliation I had carried for years finally shifted, sliding off my shoulders onto hers. Still, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like a wound finally being lanced. Necessary, painful, messy. I sat on my couch staring at the half-dead fern by the window, wondering if cutting someone off could ever really count as healing. That evening, Dad called again. His tone measured like I was still a teenager who needed scolding. You could have handled it better. We don't air dirty laundry in public. You've ruined the festival for everyone. I held the phone against my ear and listened to his. Disappointment. Waiting for the guilt to creep in like it always did. But instead, something steadier rose in me. You raised me to be responsible, I told him. And I paid for everything, for years. If you think that ruined the day, maybe you've been watching the wrong daughter. His sharp inhale told me the message landed. He ended the call without goodbye. I stood at the window as twilight dimmed over the city skyline. Denver's lights flickered to life, and I wondered when mine had gone out, buried under other people's demands. Maybe last night had been the moment I turned the switch back on. But I also knew the storm hadn't passed. It was only circling closer. 2 days later, I walked into my office. The same beige walls and humming fluorescent lights. and felt the weight of the party still clinging to me. I kept replaying the scene at the ranch, the way forks had stilled, the hush that swallowed laughter, the look on Taryn's face when the planner whispered the truth in her ear. My coworkers smiled politely as they passed my desk, unaware that inside me, a dam had cracked. That evening, my parents invited me to dinner, claiming they wanted to clear the air against my better judgment. I went. The house smelled of pot roast, my mother's usual peace offering, but her eyes told a different story. Weary, tight, already rehearsing speeches, we sat at the table, and it didn't take long. My father folded his hands, staring at me with that look he'd used since I was 12, half stern, half disappointed. "Opal, you embarrassed your sister. You should have waited until afterward to talk about money. Families handle these things privately." Taryn leaned forward, mascara smudged at the corners. "Do you know how hard I work to keep up appearances? You sabotaged me, Opal, in front of everyone." Her voice cracked on sabotaged, like the word itself was too sharp to swallow. I felt my throat tighten, but forced my voice steady. "You've been living on my paycheck for 2 years. That wasn't sabotage. That was survival, for me." Before my father could fire back, Uncle Frank, who had been quietly sipping water at the end of the table, set his glass down with a sharp clink. His posture straightened, military habits still etched into his bones. "Enough," he said, voice carrying across the room. "Opal's right. She's been the backbone of this family, while you all pretended her sister's online fantasies were real work. Maybe it's time you all stood on your own." The room froze. My mother lowered her fork. Taryn glared, lips trembling, but she didn't argue. Grandma Louise, usually silent, whispered, "It's about time someone said it." Her frail hand rested briefly over mine, and for the first time in years, I felt seen. But Dad shook his head, jaw tight. "This isn't how family behaves." I looked at him and thought, then maybe I need a new definition of family. A week slipped by before the next blow landed. I was folding laundry late on a Sunday when my phone buzzed with a message from Aunt Caroline. "Come over. We need to talk." No emojis, no pleasantries, just those words, clipped and urgent. Her house sat on the south side of Denver, shaded by old cottonwoods. When I arrived, she didn't bother with small talk. She pointed me toward the couch, her face set in lines I'd never noticed before. "Opal," she said, "there's something you don't know about your parents." The air seemed to tighten in my lungs. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, voice low. "They sold the old condo downtown last year. $120,000 cash." I blinked. "What?" "They told me money was tight. That's why they couldn't help Taryn." Caroline's eyes narrowed. "They never planned to. They put it into a real estate fund. It tanked. Almost all of it's gone." She let the words sink in, watching me the way people watch a cliff crumble. My heart thudded in my ears. They had money. They had choices. And they still let me carry it all. "That's not all," Caroline continued. "The roof repair on their house last spring. Your payments. Their health insurance the last 6 months. Yours too. They didn't tell you about the condo because they wanted you to keep covering everything." I sat, back, the world tilting. Every transfer I'd made replayed in my mind. Every late-night call from Dad. Every soft guilt trip from Mom. It wasn't just Taryn. It was all of them, feeding off me like I was some endless well. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I whispered. Her shoulders sagged. "I only found out the full story recently. And Richard begged me to keep quiet. But after what happened at the party, I couldn't." I stared at my folded hands, the edges of my nails pressing crescents into my palms. They had lied. They had chosen silence over honesty, appearance over love, and in that moment, the truth settled in hard. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was their solution. I drove home from Aunt Caroline's in silence. Denver's skyline blurred by a fog of disbelief. My parents hadn't just leaned on me. They had deceived me, deliberately, calculatingly. By the time I parked outside my apartment, my hands were trembling on the steering wheel. I wasn't sure if it was rage or grief. Inside, I sat on the edge of my bed, pulled out my laptop, and opened my banking app. Line after line of automatic transfers glared back at me. Taryn's rent, her credit card bills, the insurance premiums for my parents, the contractor payments for the roof, each one like a scar I had etched myself. I hovered for a second, then clicked through them one by one. Cancel, cancel, cancel. It felt almost ceremonial. Each confirmation screen, a small gasp of air after years underwater. When the last one disappeared, I took a deep breath that rattled my chest. Then I picked up my phone and typed a message to the 3 people who had shaped me most, and yet had stripped me bare. I'm done paying for any of you. You're on your own. My finger hesitated, then pressed send. The responses came faster than thunder. Taryn first. What's wrong with you? You can't do this. Fix it now. Then another, an hour later, dripping with panic. You're tearing this family apart. My father's text followed. We sacrificed everything for you. How dare you abandon us when we need you? And finally, my mother, softer, almost pleading. Sweetheart, think about your sister. Think about us. We're family. I set the phone face down on the counter. For once, I didn't scramble to defend myself, didn't draft explanations or apologies. I let the silence speak for me. The apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator. It felt strange, almost holy, to know I had shut the valve. No more draining myself to keep their illusions alive. I wasn't naive. I knew the storm was about to break wide open, but for the first time, the fear of it didn't choke me. Instead, a fierce, unfamiliar thought took root. Maybe letting them fall was the only way I could stand. The fallout began almost immediately. Word spread through the family grapevine faster than wildfire in the dry hills outside the city. Within 2 weeks, Taryn and her husband were slapped with the unpaid invoice from the ranch, $12,000, staring them in the face like a ghost they couldn't wish away. They tried charm, excuses, even begging the planner to hold off until next month, but she threatened legal action if they didn't pay. By the end of the month, Taryn's glossy life began to crack. She sold off her handbags one by one, posted fewer pictures online, and eventually moved from her high-rise loft to a cramped walk-up on the edge of town. She picked up work at a local diner, her influencer smile stiff behind the counter as she poured coffee and rang up orders. Her Instagram became a scrapbook of denial, captioned shots of lattes with words like resilience and new beginnings. But everyone could see the truth. Her husband didn't last. Arguments spilled into the family group chat, accusations of money mismanagement and betrayal. By week 6, he had packed up and left for a dealership job in another state. Taryn was suddenly alone with the wreckage of a brand that had never been more than smoke and mirrors. My parents didn't fare better. Without the cushion of my monthly payments, they were forced into a lifestyle they had mocked for years. Dad sold his beloved truck, the one he once waxed every Sunday morning as if it were a shrine. Mom started clipping coupons, her hands shaky as she counted cents at the grocery store. They left voicemails on my phone, Dad stern, Mom sorrowful, but I never pressed play for long. Oddly enough, I didn't feel triumphant watching their worlds crumble. I felt lighter. I had air in my lungs again. I started saving money, even took a weekend trip to Seattle simply because I could. One evening, Uncle Frank called. His voice was gruff but carried warmth. You did right, Opal. They needed this wake-up call. I hung up feeling steadier than I had in years. For once, their chaos wasn't mine to carry. And that realization was a freedom I hadn't known I'd been missing. 3 months later, I heard the knock before I saw their faces. My parents stood in the hallway of my apartment building, smaller somehow, as if the weight of their choices had carved them down. My father clutched his cap in both hands, my mother's smile trembling at the edges. Oh, Opal, she began softly. Can we come in? I stepped aside, more out of curiosity than welcome. They perched on my couch like guests in a stranger's home. My father cleared his throat, voice low. We didn't mean for things to get this far. We just wanted to keep the peace. You know how your sister is. She's always needed more. We thought you understood. The words rattled me, sharp with their casual cruelty. Understood? I had understood too well. that I was never the daughter they celebrated, only the one they used. "You let me pay your insurance," I said, my voice steady though my hands shook. "Your roof repairs, Taryn's rent, all while hiding $120,000 you gambled away. And you never thought I deserved the truth?" My mother's eyes filled, tears spilling onto her blouse. My father's jaw tightened. "We made a mistake. We didn't want to burden you with it." I laughed once, bitter and short. "Burden me. You drained me. You chose her over me every single time." Silence filled the room, broken only by the hum of the heater. My mother reached out, palm open. "We're family. Opal. We can fix this." I shook my head. "No. You wanted a bank, not a daughter. And I'm not that anymore." Their faces collapsed. Grief, disbelief, a hint of anger. I stood, pointing toward the door. "It's time for you to leave." For the first time in my life, they obeyed me. The door shut behind them with a click that sounded final. I leaned against the wall, heart pounding, tears hot in my eyes. Yet beneath the ache was something stronger, steadier. I hadn't lost a family that day. I had gained myself. 6 months passed, and life began to feel like it finally belonged to me. My apartment, once cramped with the echo of responsibility, felt open. I bought a new desk, signed up for a pottery class on Wednesday nights, even booked a trip to Santa Fe, just because I wanted to see the desert glow at dusk. Small things, ordinary things, but they were mine. I heard pieces of news through the family grapevine. Taryn was still at the diner, wearing sunglasses indoors like they could hide the fact that her world had shrunk. Her posts online were fewer now. Recycled pictures of better days. Her husband never came back. My parents were struggling, dad driving part-time deliveries, mom trying to sell crafts online. They didn't call anymore. Pride kept them quiet. Or maybe it was the realization that I wouldn't bend again. One evening, my phone buzzed with a short message from Grandma Louise. "You did what no one else could. I'm proud of you." Simple words, but they carried the weight of a lifetime. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. Not from sadness, but from relief. Someone had seen me, not as a paycheck, not as the responsible one, but as Opal. I used to think saying no meant failing my family, that stepping back would make me selfish. But I learned boundaries aren't betrayal. They are survival. They are love directed inward, after years of pouring it outward. I wasn't angry anymore. I was proud. Proud of the woman who finally chose herself, even when it meant standing alone. And for the first time, that was enough.